The European Commission has presented a new migration and asylum package. What exactly is proposed? Today, I give you an overview of important questions and answers. What exactly is the new migration and asylum package? The new migration and asylum package builds on the Commission's 2015 European Agenda on Migration and subsequent 2018 proposals. In particular, the negotiations on a common European asylum system, the CEAS, as an essential pillar of European migration policy came to a standstill due to a lack of agreement between the EU member states. Under its new President Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission has presented a communication and a bundle of new legislative and non-legislative proposals under the title Migration and Asylum Package. On this basis, a realignment and modernization of Europe's asylum and migration policy should be achieved. Proposals for a new reform package for European migration policy were originally announced by the Commission for the beginning of this year. Why has it been released now? In its annual work program, the Commission undertakes at political level to implement a certain number of priority projects over the course of a calendar year. In the 2020 work program, the Commission announced a communication on a new migration and asylum package, as well as accompanying legislative and non-legislative proposals for the first quarter of 2020. Due to the corona pandemic, there were delays in submitting the reform package. But what is the legal nature of the migration and asylum package? The legal basis for the communication and the legislative proposals are Articles 78 and 79 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. The reform package is an initiative of the Commission and was published in the form of a communication. Taken by itself, it has no legislative effect. The communication on a new migration and asylum package of 23rd of September 2020 is accompanied by a roadmap with proposals from the Commission. This includes a schedule for how to proceed in the negotiations and/or the implementation of the reform package. That's the so-called roadmap. The reform package includes a total of 5 legislative proposals, that's so-called regulation texts, and 4 non-legislative proposals, that's 3 recommendations and 1 guideline. The legislative proposals contained in the migration asylum package are regulations. A regulation is a binding legal act that all EU countries must implement in full. In contrast, there are also European guidelines. A directive is a legal act that defines an objective that all EU countries must achieve. However, it is up to each country to adopt its own legislation to achieve this goal. The documents have been available on the Commission's website since September 23rd, 2020. What are the issues covered by the communication and the Commission's accompanying proposals? The reform package of new legislative and non-legislative proposals from the Commission concerns not only the reform of the common European asylum system, but also the areas of combating organized smuggling and irregular migration, legal migration, resettlement and humanitarian admission, return and integration. What is the Common European Asylum System, the CEAS, and why should it be reformed? The Common European Asylum System has so far been made up of a total of 7 European legal acts. The key elements include minimum standards for access to and implementation of asylum procedures, that's the Asylum Procedure Directive, and for the accommodation and care of asylum seekers, that's the Reception Directive, in the EU member states. Furthermore, the so-called Eurodac regulation is part of the CEAS. The Eurodac database enables the comparison of fingerprints of asylum seekers so that it can be determined in which EU member state an asylum seeker was registered for the first time. This is relevant for the so-called Dublin regulation, which is also very important, which has so far regulated which EU member state is responsible for carrying out a person's asylum procedure. The CEAS aims to harmonize the asylum systems of the EU member states so that every asylum seeker is treated equally, regardless of the EU member state in which he or she applies for asylum. To this end, the recognition guideline details the reason for granting international protection. The resettlement regulation is also included in the CEAS. It is intended to create a European legal framework for the resettlement and admission for humanitarian reasons of third country nationals or stateless persons who need international protection. The recordings themselves should remain voluntary for the EU member states in the future. Finally, the European Asylum Support Office, the EASO, is already supporting the EU member states in implementing the CEAS. EASO is to be expanded into a comprehensive EU asylum agency in the future with the EUAA regulation. As before, there are numerous challenges in European asylum policy, such as a clear asymmetry in asylum applications to the detriment of the EU external border states and some target states for secondary migration, including Germany. The current system of jurisdiction under the Dublin regulation is unable to compensate for these asymmetries, not least because the implementation of the CEAS in the individual EU member states is sometimes inconsistent. The events in Moria bring the challenges into focus once again and make it clear that a fresh start is urgently needed for a crisis-proof asylum and migration system. As a first step, the Commission presented the new migration and asylum package on September 23rd, 2020, paving the way for a fresh start in the debate on a European asylum and migration policy. On this basis, negotiations between the EU member states are now being swiftly started into order to advance the reform process and to find a good solution for a crisis-proof and smoothly functioning system. Has the public been involved in the preparations of the reform package by the Commission? Before the Commission proposes new policy measures or legislation, it describes its initiative in a roadmap. Timetables deal with the problem to be solved and the goals to be achieved. In addition to the policy options and key features of the consultation strategy, they also explain why the EU needs to act in this area. On July 30th, 2020, the Commission published the roadmap for the new migration and asylum package on its website and used it to launch a public consultation process that ended on August 27th in 2020. During this time, all interested persons and bodies were able to comment on the Commission's plans. There were a total of 1,829 statements. These are available on the Commission's website still. Who ultimately decided on the content of the migration and asylum package? Taking into account all contributions received in the context of the public consultation, drafts will be drawn up within the relevant directorates of the Commission, which will then undergo an inter-service consultation within the Commission. So, comparable to a departmental vote within the federal government. The communication and the accompanying legislative and non-legislative proposals were adopted by the Commission. That means the 27 members of the College of Commissioners and on its meeting on September 23rd. How will the legislative proposals for the implementation of the migration and asylum package continue now? The legislative proposals are discussed in the Justice and Home Affairs Council by the relevant line ministers. A qualified majority in the Council and the consent of the European Parliament are required for their adoption. As part of the negotiations, legislative proposals are regularly revised and amended by the Council of the European Union and the European Parliament. The German Bundestag, that's the federal parliament, is involved in matters of the European Union in accordance with the provisions on the Act on Cooperation between the federal government and the German Bundestag. Specifically, the federal government continuously informs the Bundestag about the deliberations in the EU legislative procedures and gives it the opportunity to comment. If the Bundestag delivers an opinion, the federal government bases its negotiations on this. What role does Germany have in the context of the current EU Council presidency, and what will happen to the proposals of the reform package? If a member state holds the EU Council presidency, it must ensure that the work of the Council is carried out systematically and that decisions are made. The Council presidency rotates among the member states of the EU every 6 months. Germany has held the EU Council presidency since July 1st and until December 31st. This means that Germany also has the task of leading and moderating the meetings and work of the Council of the European Union in the formation of the relevant ministers. Federal Minister Horst Seehofer will hold the chairmanship of the Council of Interior Ministers of the European Union until the end of the year. The presidency is also responsible for leading and moderating the numerous working groups at civil servant level in which the legislative proposals for the reform package are negotiated. The Commission's reform package will be presented and discussed for the first time at the Virtual Council of Interior Ministers on October 8th, 2020. During the current German EU Council presidency, it will not be possible to finally negotiate all the legislative proposals that are now on the table. The federal government wants to kick off this process vigorously. With the subsequent EU Council presidencies, Portugal on the first half of 2021, Slovenia on the second half of 2021, Germany forms the so-called trio presidency. Together, they will work closely and trustingly to advance the reform process. What is the difference between the migration and asylum package that has now been submitted and the 2018 United Nations Migration or Refugee Pact? These are documents that differ in terms of the respective legal entities, the European Union or United Nations, their legal nature, the planned European legislation or the non-binding recommendations from the UN, and their target group, the European Union or the whole international community. And if you now want to know more about European or global politics, YouTube has chosen another of my videos right here for you in the end screen, right next to your chance to subscribe to my channel. And by the way, have a look in my first comment. I'll see you in my next video. Click and enjoy. Viel Spaß!